Hi, my name is Keith Deininger, and I'm sitting here in my living room recording this on my Mac, so the picture quality may not be that great, but I think you get the idea. I said, I am the author of The New Flesh, Keith Deininger, that's me, and I am going to read the first section for you. This novel is interesting to me. It's strange because when I was writing it, I didn't realize how personal it really was, but it it really is. It's the first novel I've written that comes from me. That is, I think, written in my voice with my actual style. I've tried to write. I mean, I've been writing for a long time, but this is the first real novel that I've published and that I'm really proud of. I feel very good about this one. It 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 means a lot to me. That's all I mean to say. It means a lot to me. It isn't, and it's actually me. This is me deciding, okay, I'm going to really write a novel, and I'm going to not hold back. I'm going to write what I want to write, and I'm going to do it how I want to do it. And this is the result. Um, all I can do is I hope that you like it. But anyway, I'll read the first section. This is the book. This is the limited edition hardcover edition that my publisher DarkFuse has produced. It's a beautiful book. It is. This is the dust jacket. I When I got back from the World Horror Convention in New Orleans a couple of weeks ago, these were sitting on my doorstep waiting for me. A pleasant surprise, and they're amazing. I mean, if I take this dust jacket off and show you, this is the front. I don't know if you can see that. We've got this, and what really impressed me, and which was a very pleasant surprise, was these stylized flames that you see on the inside. Fire is integral to the plot, but probably not in the way you think. So I'm going to read from this, and we'll go from there. We'll see how far I get. I thought about reading certain passages, maybe opening to a random page. So if I open to a random page right in the middle of the book, what do I get? An elongated arm snakes out of the television screen, snatches the little boy Denny by the head, and lightning shoots from the screen. The arm shakes the boy. The boy's face slackens and then stops. The boy begins to grin. Okay, well, that's more of a teaser than anything else, but that's somewhere in the middle of the book. You'll have to get to that on your own. I am going to officially start from the beginning. So let's see here. So we'll begin with the prologue. What Jake's parents didn't know, what they could never understand, what they'd forgotten as they grew older and matured into adulthood, was that the world was a wondrous and mysterious place, that it had always a matter of perception, that things bubbled and boiled beneath the surface of what could be seen and felt and heard, that sometimes these things reached out, like plunging your hand blindly into a murky pool in an attempt to recover a dropped key to the next door before you, and touched you in ways you could never understand. When he was very little, he used to have these dreams about riding through the open desert on horseback, even though he'd only ever seen such things on the TV and never actually touched a real horse. His dad would tell him stories about their ancestors being some of the first to settle the American Southwest, and he tried real hard to think about what life would have been like back then, sleeping outside and hunting for food and gunfights in the streets. But he could never quite figure it out, and soon he started to dream about other things. Mostly about fire, after what happened. The incident, his mom called it. He was guilty and scared. He'd been so mesmerized by the flame he'd lost control, and sometimes his dreams were vivid, so real he had no way to be sure if he was awake or asleep, or absorbed perhaps in a television program. And sometimes he saw things, strange contortions in reality, things that couldn't actually be there. They had blossomed from his imagination and hung about as apparitions unnatural to common law, things that were often disturbing in strange ways he could never quite grasp. Sometimes, in his dreams, he saw the melting man. But his mom and his dad were right. His fantasies weren't real, and he believed them. He shouldn't feel guilty for something that had happened over 3 years ago. He'd stopped having dreams about fire. He'd moved on. His imaginary friend, just as his dad insisted, did not exist. Okay. And we have part one, parents. It had been his son whose strangeness, even at the tender age of 6, had inspired his most successful screenplay. Never released in mainstream theaters, The New Flesh became a cult success as one of the strangest horror movies of the decade, as quoted from an online e-zine with some repute and plastered on the cover of the DVD release. But these fucks had never seen it. Probably never even heard of it. These fucks could only think in numbers, money churned from the constant production of low-budget pornography and sold to websites such as his. I probably never thought twice about artistic merit or expression before dropping to their knees and licking the shiny leather boots of the great American capitalist machine known affectionately as Uncle, Don't Call Me Motherfucker, Sam. On the little flat panel display on the wall of the cramped studio that served as his conference room, Harlan Bowden watched the same old scene. A woman with large, fake boobs bent over what was supposed to be her teacher's desk, moaning melodramatically while a barely in-shape man did her from behind, sucking air through his teeth with every thrust and without much enthusiasm. The men presenting the video, Lee and Derek, one to each side of the table, dressed in business casual, wore duplicate, mirthless expressions. When the video was done, the man blowing his disappointing load across the woman's face and open mouth, the one known as Lee turned to him, folding his hands on the table in front of him. So? Harlan grimaced. Yeah, I'll buy it. Of course I'll buy the fucking thing. I always do, don't I? Excellent, Lee said, pushing his chair back from the table and already standing. Just do one thing for me, will ya? Harlan asked. Bring me something new. Lee, standing now with his briefcase in hand, looked at Harlan blankly. Derek, still comfortably in his seat, leaned over the table. What do you mean by new, Mr. Bowden? I mean, I want something different, exciting. Something that pushes the boundaries. I want more than the same 5 fucking positions. I want story. I want violence. Anything. Derek's trimmed eyebrows raised. Violence, Mr. Bowden? Well, no, not exactly. That's not what I meant. I just want to start a new site. One that's a little more artistic. I have the money. I've been saving. You bring me something that I like, something that really gets my blood pumping, and I'll pay big. You know I will. Of course. I'll see what we can do. Derek stood. Have a good day, Mr. Bowden. In The New Flesh, the little boy Denny watches a lot of television as a way to escape the real world because his parents are always arguing, often violently. He begins to talk to the TV, and is revealed partway through the movie that he is in contact with a being he calls Zig-Zig. Imaginary or otherwise, it is never revealed, which tells Denny about things he could not possibly know. In one scene, Denny sits transfixed before the television set, while his parents argue over whether or not they should seek professional psychological help from him in the other room, Denny hearing every word, his face contorted in terror. The woman's name was Grace, and, as usual, she was overdressed for the video shoot. Harlan had asked her once, after another shoot, if she was going to a cocktail party on Mulholland Drive later, but she'd only shrugged, given her sarcastic smile, and said, You only live once. I just want to look good while I still look good. Sitting in a couple of folding chairs, they watched the procession together, as they had numerous times before. Other producers sat in a tight little semicircle with them. It was hot, humid. Sweat was in the air that breathed, the smell sour and organic. Harlan sighed inwardly. Sorry. Little dog. Just a second. Harlan sighed inwardly, glanced at the others. Pressed denim jeans and greasy, light-colored shirts unbuttoned around the throat for the men. The women also in jeans, with flats on their feet and hair pulled back and up in messy swirls, sitting in their little chairs like lazy directors, some nodding slightly, others only watching intently through the curls of cigarette smoke. Serious faces, seen money in each hump and each moan, seeing the stenciled green faces of dead presidents printed across each breast and butt cheek, along the shaft of each penis. He shifted in his chair, rubbed his temples absently against the looming headache. The director was telling one of the women to lie on her back, while the other woman straddling her in the classic 69 position. He directed the man to stand behind the redhead. How creative, Harlan thought sarcastically, pressing his fingers along his temples. After the shoot, people mingled, as they always did, discussing the new video and the industry. Harlan brooded in a corner, a Crown and Coke sweating in his hand. The drink seemed to be helping his headache a little, and people seemed to sense he was in no mood for casual discussion, and were, for the most part, letting him be. He couldn't wait for this tiresome obligation to be over, so he could get back to his apartment, draw the shades, maybe have a few more drinks, and pass out on the couch watching an old classic from his movie collection, his regular movie collection. Grace, her flowing, vibrant dress unmistakably red amongst the shoulder earth tones, was walking up to him. Oh great, here we go, Harlan thought. Enjoying the party? She asked, her lips already showing signs of her sardonic smirk. Harlan huffed. Yeah, right, party. This thing? Grace leaned casually against the wall next to him. Actually, she said, I know what you mean. I've been coming to these things for a while now, and nothing much has changed over the years. I'm just so sick of all this. She waved her open hand at the mumbling crowd. I've grown bored of the whole charade, she shrugged. But what else is there? Maybe I'll retire soon. Who knows? Harlan nodded absently, knowing it was all just small talk, expecting her to go on, perhaps asking him his opinion on the evening shoot, but she didn't. After a while, she said, I wish someone would bring us something new and exciting. There's something no creativity in our industry, I'm afraid. Harlan looked at the woman, noticing for the first time the fullness of her lips. Her pale cheeks flushed lightly from the martini she was drinking. I've been feeling the same way. Grace turned to face him fully, the alcohol and the noise from the room drawing them close. I thought that might be the case, she breathed. I could tell by the way you were sitting there watching the shoot. Harlan's head buzzed. I've been looking for something, he began. Something new. I used to be a screenwriter, you know. You must be getting drunk if you're sharing things like this with her. Really? I used to be an actress, she said. And not in pornography, a real actress. Television, mostly. A few commercials, but movies, too. Harlan nodded. I could have guessed that. Grace blushed, clearly pleased with her remark. What do you say we escape this sleazy little hellhole, she said, proffering her arm. Harlan circled his arm over hers. Why not? And Grace smiled, slightly canted. Shall we? There was a small package, wrapped in brown paper, not in his mail spot, but leaning upright against the foot of the door of his apartment, waiting for him. Harlan bent, snatched it up, tucking it beneath his arm, and fumbled the keys from his pocket. Grace stood patiently behind him, leaning on one leg so that her hip curved to one side dramatically. Harlan dropped the package by the door and left Grace to putter about the living room while he made drinks in the kitchen. Is this your kid? Grace called out across the apartment. Yeah, you must have found a picture of Jake. That's my son. Adorable. He's a weirdo. Grace laughed. When Harlan entered the living room with her drinks, Grace was standing in front of the couch, holding the brown paper package, turning it from side to side. It feels like a CD case, she said, a slight crease running between her eyes. Harlan took the package from her and handed Grace her martini. He tossed the package on the end of the table, sipped his drink. Grace was looking at him. Well, aren't you going to open it? Later. Oh, come now. I'm not here to pry. Are you curious? No name, no address? What could it be? All right, fine. Let's see what it is. Harlan set his drink down and took up the package. He ripped the paper away and tossed it by his feet. He turned the seedy jewel case in his hands. It was blank, no labels. Grace was by his shoulder. Oh, what is it? He flipped the case open to a blank DVD, one of those cheap ones you can buy on the spindle. Harlan sighed. Let's try it. He stood, took a couple of steps across the room of his entertainment center, opened the extravagant doors with row after row of DVDs meticulously categorized to his 90-inch LCD flat screen, and slid the blank disc into the player. He dropped back into the couch next to Grace and flipped the screen to life with the remote. Impressive collection. What are all those? Harlan powered on the DVD player and hit play on the remote. Horror movies mostly, but there are other things too. Grace nodded. The screen flickered in the dimly lit apartment. A room came into view, framed in medium shot, a small room, tiled floors, a grand red curtain pulled across the background, and a single piece of furniture, a table made from 3 large slabs of stone, the largest resting atop the other 2. Grace leaned forward eagerly. Harlan lit a cigarette. For a minute or two, it was only the room. Then a woman in panties and bra stepped into the scene, tiptoed like the room was cold, and climbed up onto the stone table. She looked at the camera, blinking a couple of times. The man came after her. He was wearing a mask of large, dark-pooled eyes and exuberant cartoon grin. He held a dangling coil of chain in one hand. Another man followed the first, this one wearing an equally hideous mask, its stretched mouth turned down to a droopy frown. The 2 men used the chain, wrapped it beneath the table and over, tying the woman in place about her waist. "What is this?" Grace breathed. "I don't know." Both men, the happy and the sad one, produced black leather whips from the folds of their robes and began taking turns whipping the restrained woman. The woman cried out with each lash. Grace shifted in her seat. "Is this real?" "I don't think so," Harlan said. What followed was a not entirely original torture and sex scene. The men took turns, one holding the woman down while the other fucked her furiously. There was slapping and roughness. At one point the woman bit the happy masked man. He yelped in surprise. But mostly it was a brutal scene that ended with both men bent over the writhing woman, choking her until she was still. When the video stopped, there was stillness in the apartment. The air buzzed with silence. Slowly, Helen bent and picked the discarded wrapping paper from the ground, turning it, looking for a clue as to who might have sent this video. "Is this what they thought he was looking for?" He broke the silence. "That was a little weird, huh?" "Yeah." He turned to look at Grace for the first time since the video had started. Her bosom was heaving, her eyes smoldering, pupils dilated. She licked her swollen lips. "Kiss me," she said. "Zig told me about other worlds. One's in there," Denny says in Harlan's only produced film outside of the porn industry. Denny's father. "And where?" "There," Denny says, pointing at the TV screen jagged with snow, his face soft with wonder. "What's it like in there?" "Lightning and fire," I whispered. "Lightning and fire." Shall I go on? I'm feeling it. Why not? I'll go on. Let me give you. Let me give maybe one more chapter. Yeah, you gotta see. Yeah, I'll give you one more. I'll give you one more. If you can handle this one. Let's see. Let me. Okay. Chapter 2. Part 1, Chapter 2. Last night, Jake had had that nightmare again. The familiar one. The one he hadn't dreamt in a while. The one where he didn't put the fire out. Where he couldn't put it out. And flickering orange flames spread and burned, lurching around in their creepy dance. It had been bad this time, bad enough to stay with him while he sat at the kitchen table trying to choke down his bowl of fast-going soggy Lucky Charms. Bad enough that he jumped when his mom cleared her throat behind him, shuffling past in her droopy, coffee-stained robe. Bad enough he couldn't help himself from staring at the little orange spot of flame at the end of the match as his mother moved it to the tip of her cigarette. "Do I have to go to school today, Mom?" "Of course, it's only Tuesday. Why? Are you not feeling good?" She picked up her muffin, put it back down, took hold of her mug, pictures of cartoon cats cavorting around its rim, and sipped her coffee. "I'm not sick or anything, I just..." Jake tried to think what he could say. How he could get his mom to understand how he felt. "I don't know," he said, signing into the bowl of grayish-blue milk left over from his cereal. "I guess I'll just go to school." "Good. Now hurry up and get dressed. You're going to be late." Jake shuffled down the hallway to his room. There was a bus that could take him, but he only lived a couple of miles from school, so he usually walked. Besides, the bus was too crowded, too noisy, too many kids screaming and throwing things. It made him uncomfortable. His face would flush, his palms would sweat. He didn't fit in. He didn't like being squished against the cold, thin steel of the bus's frame, his breath fogging the window, his butt sticking to the plastic seat. The kids next to him who wouldn't sit still, bouncing, jigging, yelling to be heard over all the other kids. He preferred to walk. It was only a couple of miles, and he liked being outdoors. Sometimes his friend Jesse, who lived a couple of blocks down the street, would walk with him, or Jesse's mom would give him a ride, but most of the time he walked alone. Today, the morning air was crisp and cool. Before long, he forgot about the nightmare and his earlier trepidations. He moved easy, whistling softly to himself, a talent he practiced for countless hours in his room to master and was quite proud of. His walk took him through the neighborhood. He passed Jesse's house and came up to Old Man Green's perfectly green and meticulously manicured lawn. Green's house was a corner lot, and Green was known to chase kids that dared to cut across his lawn on their way to and from school away with a broom. Jake was careful to use the sidewalk. He passed Johnny's place, known to most of the kids Jake's age as Johnny the babysitter, because he picked up extra cash watching kids around the neighborhood and let you watch rated R movies if you wanted to. Then he came upon Mrs. Marlowe's extravagantly gardened yard and her collection of plastic gnomes spread throughout the lush vegetation. When he reached the construction zone, where the suburb came to a halt, he cut across the street. Since the company that had been working on the housing expansion project had suddenly gone bankrupt a couple of years ago, several of the plots had been cleared and now stood empty and abandoned, leaving, in some places, the skeletal husks of houses that would probably never be built. On the other side of the street was a large apartment complex, cutting through a pathway between the uninspiring brown buildings with their high spire roofs. He came upon a dirt bike path skirting the edge of the creek that ran through the middle of the neighborhood. The creek wasn't really a creek, but more of a ditch for water runoff to keep the neighborhood from flooding. A flat expanse of sand cut through with shallow rivulets of water. He often spent time wandering the creek and playing in the water, and sometimes, when he had more time, walked to school along the sandy bed itself. Today, however, he took the path, walking briskly, passing over the large concrete, algae-encrusted drainage pipe that was like an opening into the caverns beneath the city, passing the swampy area with the tadpoles and little frogs he could catch, and out into the playground at the back of the school. A little ways farther along, there was a small forest area the locals called Sherwood Forest, where Jake had built his treehouse. 3 years ago, he started the fire in there. Started the fire he couldn't put out, a charred area of black, still barren of all growth, even after 2 years. As if some kind of demon had risen there, coming out from beneath the earth, lighting the spot, marking it for future entrance. School that day was boring, as usual. Fire, he'd learned, once he'd really seen it in action, lives and dies by its own sordid rules. It hypnotizes, so small, then multiplying. Its flickers don't appear real, but it heats the cheeks and the bridge of the nose, sitting crouched before a pile of leaves, a pack of matches in his grubby hands. It mesmerizes, erases the rational mind. It is primal and it is powerful. It dances and it eats, and grows and looks for more. It is everywhere, and he is afraid he started it. He must have started it. He falls into these trances, and he just can't help himself. He licks his lips and lights the matches, and he hardly knows what he's doing. He lights the dried leaves like insect crusts, and he stares at the little flames kicking up their sides and folding over and upwards, and when he has a chance to stop things from getting out of control, to stomp out the flames under the rubber soles of his keds, he just watches and feels the tingling heat on his face and hands. It's just, he's not in control of himself. He feels good in these moments. It feels only natural to let go of himself and bask in the hunger of the flames. Let it burn, he sometimes thinks, as he inhales the acrid smoke. Then everything is burning. In the forest grove, the branches of the trees above enshroud the scene in lowly crackling flame. The bushes sputter and crunch like the carcasses of dead animals, brittle bones snapping, one and the other. The underbrush sizzles, smoke rising from the tender green foliage going gray, losing color. He looks up and out between the burning branches, and the horizon is black, and he can see his school, and the playground is burning, and there are horses in a panic in the soccer field, whinnying and kicking the smoke-filled air with their hooves. The monkey bars melted and sagging, and the buildings are charred behemoths. It's beautiful, don't you think? The voice is right over his shoulder, but he doesn't want to turn. He can feel the cool spray of breath on the back of his neck. But it's about more than aesthetics. It shows us what life is really about, wouldn't you agree? It eats and eats for as long as it can, as much as it can, and then dies, and only charred remnants of its destruction are left behind. He shudders. He begins, I want to wake up now. The voice inhales like water droplets hitting a fry pan. Of course, but don't worry. All you have to do is remember. You must not forget. You can change the world and I can help you. But not now. You can go. It's okay. He begins to turn. Oh God, he doesn't want to turn. He can feel his heart pounding in his ribcage. He can feel his hands sweating and trembling. If he turns, he'll see that face. He doesn't want to see that face, but he can't help it. This is what happens at the end of the dream. This is what always happens. The face is already fading back into the flaming foliage. He only catches a glimpse, a face like melting grease, flesh running and pooling about a wide grin of shark's teeth, pointed ears bent, striating with pulsing veins, eyes looking out through the shifting miasma, bright and mischievous. And he tries to look away, to force himself to awaken from the nightmare like pulling himself from a warm, drowning pool. He struggles, but his body will not move. Someday, the voice of the melting man, high and crisp, says, already fading, muffled as if speaking from the other side of a window. You'll have to follow me and see what happens. I can show you things, beautiful things. You'll see. The boy gapes. He can feel himself shaking all over. His heart beats frantically at his chest like a cornered animal. Wake up, wake up, wake up! The face of the melting man continues to fade backwards and bulges, inflating from the sides so that one eye expands, the quivering glare of a runny egg, and there's a gleeful tittering like a cruel cartoon or funhouse clown taking pleasure in repulsing its young audience. Wake up, please, wake up! Someone was shaking him. He opened his eyes. Jesse loomed over him. Wake up, come on. Recess is over, Jake. It's time for social studies. Hey. What the hell, Jake? Falling asleep on the soccer field? You're a weirdo. Jake smiled ruefully, his dream already a distant memory. Yeah, that's what my dad says. Okay, and it goes on from there. If you want to read the rest, you can pick it up from Amazon, of course. You can pick it up. So DarkFuse is the publisher. They have impressed me to no ends, and they are doing very well in the publishing industry. You can also find it. You can request it from any bookstore that you're looking for in mass market paperback. This is the hardcover. Where I live, you can get it all over town because I've been all over town looking. So this is the paperback, and that's that. Again, my name is Keith Deininger. If you're looking for any information, you can find me, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, my website, KeithDeininger.com. That's KeithDeininger.com. I'm more than willing to talk about things. I'm kind of a literary horror kind of guy, so I like to discuss and analyze and that kind of thing. If you ever see me in a bar, I'd love to have a couple of drinks and talk about literature, and hopefully I'll see you there.